Darrell drove into the lot of Prestige Motors, the high-end dealership he had just purchased in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. The desert sun bounced off the sleek luxury cars lined up out front, their shiny surfaces gleaming brightly in the afternoon heat. He parked his modest SUV in an unmarked spot near the back and stepped out, taking a moment to examine the dealership's exterior. His outfit was deliberately low-key, a simple gray hoodie, worn jeans, and sneakers, intended to avoid drawing any attention. He wanted to witness the dealership's true nature, to see how it operated when the staff didn't realize their new owner was present. As Darrell made his way to the entrance, he spotted a small group of employees gathered near the front desk, their quiet laughter and easy chatter drifting through the glass doors. He opened the door and stepped inside. The cool, air-conditioned showroom was a stark contrast to the heat outside, carrying the subtle aroma of leather and freshly polished cars. Rows of immaculate vehicles shimmered under the bright overhead lighting. The conversations died down as Darrell entered, and he noticed the quick glances the staff exchanged, their eyes flicking over his casual attire. He sensed a subtle change in the atmosphere, one that spoke volumes without a word. But he wasn't there to judge, he was there to observe. Then, across the showroom, she appeared. Susan, a middle-aged woman with sharp features and an even sharper gaze. She carried herself with unmistakable authority. Her tailored blazer and polished heels added to her commanding presence, while the clipboard tucked under her arm lent an air of efficiency. She approached purposefully, her heels clicking crisply on the polished floor. Her expression was courteous at first, yet the tightness in her smile did not go unnoticed by Darrell. "Can I assist you with something?" Susan asked, her tone cool and clipped. Darrell smiled calmly. "Just here to look around," he replied casually, gesturing toward the cars. Susan's eyes narrowed as she assessed him from head to toe. Her polite facade flickered briefly, replaced by a less welcoming expression. "Are you shopping for a car?" she asked, suspicion evident in her voice. Darrell nodded, still smiling. "Something like that." Susan pursed her lips. "Well, we cater to a very specific clientele here. Most of our inventory requires pre-qualification. Maybe I could recommend." Before she could finish, another employee called out, "Hey Susan, the delivery guy is here." Her attention momentarily shifted, but she quickly fixed her gaze back on Darrell, as if to make sure he didn't wander. Darrell raised an eyebrow but kept his voice light. "You're assuming I'm not qualified." The question seemed to catch her off guard, though only briefly. She recovered quickly, her posture stiffening. "I'm just trying to save you some time," she said with a forced smile. "These vehicles start at 6 figures. Maybe I can direct you to—" Darrell's expression remained unchanged, but internally he noted the implication in her words. Though outwardly composed, the subtle sting of her assumptions was unmistakable. The moment stretched, tension hanging between them as Susan waited expectantly. Darrell glanced around the showroom, pretending to admire a near-by car, a sleek silver coupe with a fierce design. His fingers brushed the door handle, and then he looked back at Susan. "Nice car," he said simply. Her eyebrows furrowed slightly, but she forced another smile. "It is. Perhaps when you're ready to make a serious inquiry, we can set up an appointment. For now, I'll have to ask you not to touch the vehicles." Darrell stood silently for a moment, considering her words. Then, stepping back from the car, he nodded once, hands in his pockets, signaling her to continue. "All right, let's hear it. What would you recommend for someone like me?" Before she could reply, Darrell interjected, "If you believe you know what I need, I'm listening." Her courteous mask cracked just enough to show the impatience beneath. "Maybe something more budget-friendly," she said. "I can direct you to a dealership that specializes in pre-owned vehicles." Darrell gave a slight smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. He had already seen enough. "That's quite an assumption," he said quietly. The comment hung between them for a moment. Susan faltered briefly, but quickly regained her poise, straightening her posture. "I'll be back with a list of options," she said briskly, walking away. Darrell watched her leave, his expression unreadable. He turned back to the silver coupe, his reflection staring back from the shiny surface. This is going to be an interesting day. Standing in the middle of the showroom, hands in his pockets, he surveyed the lineup of cars. He wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but Susan's dismissive tone was hard to overlook. Around him, the staff had returned to their conversations, though he noticed the occasional glance his way. It was the kind of quiet scrutiny he'd grown used to over the years, the silent judgments, the subtle looks. Susan returned shortly after, her clipboard gripped tightly as if a shield. Her quick steps and forced smile betrayed her irritation. "All right," she said, stopping a few feet from him. "I've put together some options that might better suit your situation." Darrell tilted his head slightly. "My situation? Yes," Susan replied curtly, handing him a printout of pre-owned cars, each with detailed descriptions and prices well below the dealership's usual offerings. "These are more accessible models, reliable, economical, and practical." Darrell accepted the list without comment, eyes scanning the page: a used sedan, an older SUV, a compact hybrid. A faint smirk tugged at his lips, quickly masked as he folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. "I appreciate the effort," he said. His tone remained steady. Susan seemed briefly taken aback by his reply, but she quickly regained her composure, placing her hands on her hips. "Listen," she said, lowering her voice as if about to reveal something confidential. "I'm just trying to be realistic with you. Prestige Motors isn't for everyone. I don't want to waste your time." Darrell held her gaze, calm yet resolute. "And what exactly makes you think I'm not your ideal customer?" Susan hesitated, but only for a fleeting moment. "I've been doing this a long time," she replied. "I can tell when someone's out of their depth." "Out of their depth," Darrell echoed neutrally, almost thoughtfully. "Interesting." A flicker of doubt crossed Susan's eyes, but she pressed on. "I'm just being honest. It's better to be upfront than to have someone leave disappointed." Darrell chuckled softly, shaking his head a bit. "Honesty, huh? I like honesty. How about this? You let me talk to the owner. Think we can make that happen?" Susan's eyebrows shot up, genuinely caught off guard for the first time. "The owner? That's right." Darrell replied casually, his tone light, almost conversational. "I'd like to have a word with them." Susan forced a weak smile. "Well, that's not possible today. The owner doesn't just stop by for casual visits. They're a very busy person." "I'm sure." Darrell nodded slightly. "But maybe you could give them a call. Let them know I'm here. I think they'd want to meet me." Susan's smile tightened as her patience began to wear thin. "Look, sir, I'm trying to be as polite as possible, but this is getting ridiculous. I have other customers to attend to. If you're serious about buying a car, we can schedule a meeting with one of our sales consultants. Otherwise—" "Otherwise what?" Darrell asked, his voice calm, but with a subtle sharpness creeping in. Susan's eyes narrowed, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "Otherwise," she said, her tone firm, "I'll have to ask you to leave." The words hung heavily in the air, loaded with unspoken consequences. Darrell remained motionless, his gaze locked on hers. For a moment, the entire showroom seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, Darrell reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "All right," he said, scrolling through his contacts. "I'll make the call myself." Susan blinked, her brow furrowing. "What are you doing?" she asked, bewildered. "Just calling the owner." Darrell replied, lifting the phone to his ear. "Shouldn't take long." Susan's confident demeanor wavered, irritation melting into confusion. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. Around them, several employees paused their work, their attention drawn to the unfolding scene. Darrell raised a finger in a just a moment gesture, then turned slightly away, speaking quietly into the phone. "Yeah, it's me. I'm at the dealership. Everything's fine, just a little misunderstanding. Could you let them know I'm here?" He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket, turning back toward Susan. "They'll be here shortly," he said simply. Susan stared at him, mouth slightly agape. Who did you just call?" Darrell didn't respond immediately. Instead, his eyes scanned the showroom, lingering on the staff now watching intently. "Guess we'll find out," he said with a hint of playfulness in his tone. The tension in the room was thick, pressing down on everyone present. Susan shifted uneasily, her poise beginning to falter. Minutes passed, though the air felt frozen in place. Susan busied herself with her clipboard, but her movements were stiff and deliberate, betraying her discomfort. Darrell, in contrast, stood casually beside one of the luxury SUV, waiting. His composed manner only heightened the tension in the room. The few employees scattered throughout the showroom whispered quietly among themselves, casting furtive glances at the developing scene. It was obvious everyone was anticipating the arrival of someone or something. Suddenly, the sound of the main doors opening shattered the silence. A sharply dressed man in a navy suit entered, his polished shoes clicking softly against the tiled floor. His expression was serious yet warm, and his eyes immediately locked onto Darrell. "Mr. Carter," the man greeted with a broad smile, extending his hand as he approached. "It's great to see you." Darrell responded with a firm handshake, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Thanks for coming, Alex. I appreciate it." The entire room tensed collectively. Susan nearly dropped her clipboard, her eyes darting back and forth between Darrell and Alex, the dealership's regional director. Her initial confusion swiftly turned into visible alarm. "Wait, Mr. Carter," she repeated uncertainly. Alex turned toward her, his friendly demeanor shifting into a more professional, almost curt tone. "Susan, I see you've already met Mr. Carter." Susan blinked, opening and closing her mouth as if searching for the right words. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize," Alex interrupted sharply. "He's the new owner of this dealership." He glanced at Darrell, offering an apologetic look. "I trust this wasn't the kind of welcome you expected." Darrell raised a hand to stop him. "It's all right, Alex. I think Susan and I just started off on the wrong foot." His voice was calm, but the weight behind his words held the room in quiet suspense. Susan's face paled, and she took a step back, clutching her clipboard to her chest like a shield. I'm so sorry," she stammered, barely above a whisper. "I didn't know." "You didn't know what?" Darrell asked gently but firmly. "That someone like me could own a place like this, that someone like me might actually belong here." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she seemed completely lost. "I didn't mean—" Darrell raised a hand to stop her once more. "No problem, Susan," he said softly, stepping closer. His voice lowered just enough to draw everyone's attention. "But let me ask you something. If I weren't the owner, would you have treated me differently? Would you have shown me the same respect you'd give to someone who walked in wearing a suit and tie?" Susan opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence was overwhelming. Darrell nodded, taking her quiet response as enough. Then he turned to Alex, his tone now carrying more authority. "Let's get everyone into the conference room. It's time we had a serious talk about how things are managed around here." The employees filed into the sleek conference room, the atmosphere thick with tension. Though the room was designed to impress, with glass walls and modern furniture, it felt suffocating today. Susan sat near the back, her usual confident air replaced by nervous stillness. Darrell stood at the head of the table, calm and composed, commanding everyone's focus. Alex stayed by the door, arms crossed, his face unreadable as he observed the staff take their seats. The murmurs died down as Darrell cleared his throat, sweeping his gaze across the group. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." He began, measured but firm. "For those who don't know me, I'm Darrell Carter. As of last month, I am the new owner of Prestige Motors." A few employees murmured in surprise, reactions ranging from curiosity to embarrassment. Susan lowered herself further in her chair, avoiding eye contact. "I came dressed casually today for a reason," Darrell continued steadily. "I wanted to see how this dealership really runs when no one knows who I am. I wanted to understand what a potential customer feels when they walk through these doors." He paused, letting the words sink in before moving on. "What I experienced today was disappointing. I was judged not on what I can offer, but on how I looked. I'm not here to single anyone out, but we need to discuss what that says about the culture here." Susan shifted uneasily, her cheeks flushed. Darrell's eyes flickered to her briefly before returning to address the entire group. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It concerns every individual who steps through those doors, every client who doesn't fit into someone's preconceived idea of what a luxury car buyer should look like." One of the younger sales associates hesitated, then raised his hand. Darrell nodded in his direction. "Go ahead, Mr. Carter." The man began nervously. "I think most of us do try to treat customers fairly, but sometimes it's hard not to make assumptions." Darrell considered this, nodding thoughtfully. "I understand," he said. "We all carry biases, whether we admit it or not. But here's the thing, it's not enough to simply try to be fair. We must actively confront those biases. We need to build an atmosphere where everyone feels respected, no matter their appearance, background, or anything else." He paused to let his words settle before continuing. "This dealership has earned a reputation for excellence, but excellence isn't just about the cars we sell. It's about the experience we deliver. From now on, that experience will be grounded in respect, inclusivity, and fairness." A ripple of agreement passed through the room, though some faces remained cautious. Darrell's gaze fixed on Susan, who sat still, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. "Susan," he said gently but firmly, "I want to give you a chance to speak. Is there anything you'd like to share?" All eyes turned toward her. She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. I made a mistake," she admitted, cheeks reddening. "I misjudged you, and for that I am truly sorry." Darrell nodded, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for saying that," he replied. "I hope this moment will remind all of us, not just you, that change begins with accountability." Turning back to the group, he added, "Moving forward, we will introduce new training programs to ensure this dealership reflects the values I stand for. Every customer deserves respect, no exceptions. If anyone here disagrees, now is the moment to speak up." The room fell silent. The quiet in the conference room was overwhelming, interrupted only by the soft buzz of the air conditioning. No one said a word, yet Darrell's message hung heavily in the air, weighing on everyone present. Darrell allowed the stillness to linger just long enough to emphasize his point before continuing, his tone steady but firm. "Good," he said. "I'm glad we're all aligned. Change isn't always simple, but it's essential. This dealership will set the standard." He stepped back from the table, resting his hands lightly on its surface as he leaned in slightly. "Let me be clear, I didn't come here to embarrass anyone. I came to learn what kind of culture I've inherited, and how we can improve it." His gaze shifted toward Susan, who remained quietly seated near the back. "Susan," he said, his voice softening so it didn't feel like a reprimand, "you're a seasoned manager, and I'm sure you've worked hard to reach your position. But today was a wake-up call, for you and for all of us." Susan finally lifted her eyes to meet his. "I understand," she replied, her voice trembling but honest. "I was wrong, and I'm committed to making this right." Darrell nodded approvingly. I believe in second chances." He spoke plainly, but accountability must come first. "I'll be meeting individually with each of you to discuss the next steps. For now, let's focus on moving ahead." Straightening up, he turned his gaze back to the team. "We're not merely selling cars here, we're building trust, forging relationships, and upholding a standard of excellence. If you're with me on this, I'm here to support you every step of the way." A murmur of agreement spread, this time louder and more sincere. The staff visibly relaxed, the earlier tension melting away to reveal a renewed sense of purpose. Even Alex, who had quietly stood near the door, nodded in approval. Daryl's faint smile showed both relief and determination. "All right then, let's get back to work. And remember, how we treat people matters far more than anything we sell." As the employees began to leave the room, Daryl noticed Susan lingering by the doorway. She approached him hesitantly, her hands nervously twisting. "Mr. Carter," she began softly, I want to thank you for giving me a chance to improve. I won't let you down." Daryl studied her for a moment, then replied with steady calm, "I hope you mean that, Susan. Actions speak louder than words, but I believe people can change if they're willing to try." She nodded, eyes sincere, "I am." After she walked away, Daryl turned to Alex. "Let's schedule a meeting with the staff next week," he said. "I want to ensure everyone understands what's expected moving forward." Alex grinned, his respect for Daryl clear. "You got it, boss." Stepping back into the showroom, Daryl scanned the cars, their gleaming surfaces reflecting the afternoon sun. He reflected on the road ahead, the work that still needed doing. But for the first time that day, he felt hopeful. This was more than managing a dealership. It was about building something greater, a place where people are judged by their character, not their looks, and Daryl was ready to lead the way.